crowd gathered on 19th Street. She'd be willing to bet her shield that's exactly what the bastard had done. And what about the woman who'd been his accomplice in Baltimore? Had she been here too? Was she part of everything from the start? What was the deal with the two of them? Lovers? Former inmates at some asylum? And what connected them to Kyle Craig? Bree sat on the edge of the roof, then finally let herself down the scaffold, carefully, because she was feeling a little shaky right now. Too much stress, not enough sleep, not enough Alex either. Seconds later, she was on the ground. From there, she forced herself to follow the killer's most likely path, up the alley to A Street, and back around to 19th. It was quiet now, especially compared to 2 days ago. A single MPD cruiser was parked in front of the house. Howie Pearsall, the officer she'd brought with her, was leaning against the passenger side. Howie was a good man, a friend of hers, just not the most ambitious guy in the world. Bringing him was a safety precaution, but not one that Bree took seriously. She was more likely to protect Howie than the other way around. He stood up straight and brushed something off his shirt when he saw her coming. "At ease, soldier. Don't worry about it," she said. "Sorry I took so long, Howie." "How'd it go in there?" he wanted to know. "Howie, it didn't. Hold on, I'll be right back." She went up the front walk and tore the police notice off the door. So much for the crime scene.
Excuse me, detective?"
The guy behind her on the lawn seemed to have come out of nowhere. What the hell was his deal?
"I'm Neil Stevens with the AP. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions."
Chapter 94.
Neil Stevens, or rather DCAK, wanted to shoot Bree Stone full of holes right there in the front of the house. Pull the .357 out of his vest. Bam. Dumb cop dead on the front walk. Get the uniform sloppily moping around by the squad car, too. But no, this wasn't even a rehearsal, much less a performance. Maybe it was groundwork for later on, though. And a little bit of fun, too. Detective Stone was, after all, a stone-cold fox. And she was Alex Cross's girlfriend, wasn't she? That made this very cool. Gave it stature and importance in his mind. Stone kept moving toward the cruiser.
"No comment,"
she said, not even making eye contact with him. So she was a bitch on wheels as well as a mediocre detective, figured. Cops weren't much of a challenge. Maybe collectively they were. He pulled the Leica around on its strap. "Just a quick photo, then?" Like he cared about the picture. What he wanted was for Stone to see him. To have seen the character he was playing today, Neil Stevens. Detective Bree Stone was his audience right now. But she didn't even look. She held up a palm and got into the car, talked to the hand puppet.
"Let's go,"
she said to the cop at the wheel, and they pulled away from the curb. End of interview. Neil Stevens called out to her, "Having a bad day, Detective Stone?" It was meant to be in character, the parting shot of a pushy journalist. He wasn't even sure she'd heard it, until the police cruiser suddenly braked. Then the car backed up several feet to where he was standing. Bree Stone climbed out and gave him a quick once-over. Now he had her attention. But was that a good thing?
"What did you say your name was?"
she asked.
"I didn't catch the name."
"Stevens, out of Chicago. Associated Press." The worst thing he could do right now was flinch, so he stepped closer instead. That's what Neil would do, get the story. "I left you a voicemail this morning?" He hadn't. "Actually, I was hoping to do a piece on your team while I was here in Washington." He was handling this pretty well, but his position still wasn't good. The logic wasn't quite right, didn't feel solid to him. Stone must have thought so too.
"Could I see some ID?"
she asked next. So what did he do now? He stepped closer again and handed the identification to her. He could see the other cop out of the corner of his eye, both hands still on the wheel. Stone's gun was holstered on her right hip, next to her badge. He had her, no doubt about it in his mind. He could take her out right here, right now. He knew that he should, too. She looked at him again, her face more relaxed than before.
Yeah, okay. We could do a quickie back at the office. I'll introduce you to whoever's around. How's that sound?
She was almost convincing. Almost fooled me, Detective. But her tone told DCAK everything he needed to know, including that he had to act now, or he was toast. His fist flew up and struck Breestone in the temple. Christ, she had a hard head for a woman. He grabbed her Glock and shot the other cop right through the open window. DCAK fired into the crumpled form again to make sure. Then he turned back to Stone. She was still down, obviously hurt but not unconscious. One hand was pressed against her forehead, blood dripping between the fingers. She tried to reach for him. He hooked her with his foot and flipped her on her back. "Don't move!" he screamed in her face. He put the gun inches from her eyes. "Look at me, Bree. Remember my fucking face. And every time you do, you'll know what a total screw-up you are. You and your main mount, Alex Cross. Hey, you just met DCAK."
Chapter 95. I rushed to be with Bree at St. Anthony's emergency room, which is where my wife, Maria, had been pronounced dead, and I couldn't get that terrible, morbid thought out of my head. Bree was getting stitches when I got there. Word was they practically had to drag her into the ER. Unfortunately, an officer named Howie Pearsall was dead. Another cop down. Bree started talking as soon as she saw me. "He made a big mistake today, Alex. It wasn't supposed to go down like this, I'm sure of it." "He didn't expect to see you there." "No, I don't think that he did. But we can't be 100% sure of that, Bree. He's the man with the plan, right?" She winced at the stitch she'd just gotten. The doctor working on her looked up at me for help, but Bree kept talking. "He made the best of it, though. Taunted me, Alex. Let me see the character he was playing. Some AP reporter. Neil Stevens, he said. Anything in the name? Or that he was playing a reporter this time? He said he was from Chicago." "Let's talk about this when you're done," I said, and squeezed her hand. She was still for a few seconds, but then blurted out, "Did you know Howie Pearsall just got married? Couple of weeks ago. Wife's a special ed teacher." I nodded, trying to model silence until the sewing job on Bree was finished. "I didn't see anybody else, Alex. No female in sight. Maybe she was just a one-shot, a distraction. Hey, be careful with that knitting needle, will you?" "Sorry, Detective," said the ER doctor. "Don't be sorry, be careful." Afterward, Bree and I sat in the lobby to talk. I had a few things to say to her that I knew she wouldn't want to hear. "Bree, this thing just turned another corner. We both know it did. If he didn't kill you today, it's only because it didn't fit with a different plan he's already made, a different role he intended to play. I'd be more comfortable if you didn't work alone for the rest of the case. Make any sense?" "Alex, I wasn't alone at the house. I went there with another officer. He's dead now." I nodded. "Okay, I understand. I'm sorry to sound condescending. There's something else I need to say. I want you to come stay with us." "No. Thank you, but no, Alex. I'm not moving because of him. I've seen the son of a bitch now. We're going to nail him. He's going down, I promise you that, in flames if I have anything to say or do about it." This was all kind of ironic. How many times had I been on the other side of the same sort of conversation? I hadn't really expected Bree to go for my idea, and I respected her too much to even suggest she back off the investigation. Besides, she wouldn't do it anyway. "I'm fine, Alex. I'm okay. Thanks for being nice. Let's just get out of here. People die in hospitals." We were on our way to my car when Sampson called. He sounded excited on the phone. "Alex, we cracked the IP address. I think it just went live. Anyway, he's got a new website up." "Jesus, you're kidding. Let me get Bree settled and I'll be right there." "Excuse me?" She was already giving me a look. "Whatever this is, I'm coming with you. Period. End of discussion." "Sampson, we'll be right there." Chapter 96. Homicide was strangely quiet when we got there. The office was virtually deserted, actually. I knew that most everybody was out on the street looking for DCAK, or leads on him anyway. "How you doing, Bree?" Sampson stood to let her sit, but she stayed standing where she was. Stayed stubborn and strong. The Rock. "I'm good. Couldn't be better, big man. What have you got?" Sampson laughed at Bree's bravado. Then the three of us cracked up. "More of his greatest hits," Sampson said. "Let me show you the latest." We looked at the screen, where the new site had been called up. It had the same headline as the original, "My Reality," in bold white letters on a black background. "Give me a break," Bree muttered. "I am so going to mess this guy up next time I see him." "Bree, Bree, Bree," I muttered, and left it at that. I took the mouse and started scrolling down. Instead of a blog or any text at all, it was just images this time. They were stacked in 2 columns, pictures of his self-created killers on the left, his roles, and the respective victims on the right. The top 2 were screen captures from the fake Iraqi video. Next came a shot of Tess Olson on all fours, with a red leash around her neck. Another row of pictures showed the X-Files professor type from the Kennedy Center, and a publicity still of Matthew J. Walker, but with a green X over his face. Then came the fake copycat with the Richard Nixon mask, and 2 pictures of the young kids he'd slaughtered on the Parkway overpass. Abby Courlevet's picture was a family snapshot that had run all over the news, her husband and little boy smiling next to her. The whole world had been exposed to the image. The last 2 photos were grainy and blurred, but clear enough for us to make out details. Bree recognized the reporter, Neil Stevens, even with a White Sox cap pulled down low over his eyes. Then came Kit's. His eyes and mouth were open, and there was a spatter of blood across his chin. The shot was obviously taken after he'd been cut, but before the rubber mask had been applied to his face. We were looking at a picture of Kit's dying. Bree banged her fist against the desk. "What the hell does he want? Is this his idea of fame and goddamn glory?" She turned and walked out of the office. Better she let the steam out here than somewhere else. I heard her pacing and then the glug of a water cooler. "Just give me a second," she called from the hall. "I'm fine, Alex. Just a little nuts." Sampson nudged my shoulder. "Keep going." At the bottom of the page was another familiar icon from the original site. It was an image of a television set with a screen full of animated static. The box was larger than before, but otherwise looked the same. Beneath it was a clickable link that read, "Coming soon." "Cocksucker," Sampson blurted out. "He's in our face all the time now." I figured the icon would bring up a new image or a video of some kind, but instead the computer opened a blank outgoing email. It was addressed to dcak5569@hotmail.com, presumably as untraceable as everything else he'd done. Bree came back into the room and stood behind me. She started to massage my neck and shoulders. "I just let myself get overloaded. Won't happen again." "Yeah, it will. What do you think of this?" I asked her. "Well, it's a direct communication anyway. That's something we usually hope for, right? On the other hand, replying means we're still playing his game. but maybe we have to.